Hello guys, today we are going to discuss an important topic of AS level, that is terms of trade. So for that purpose, let me share my screen with you, my PowerPoint slides with you. Okay ji, terms of trade is a ratio of average export price index to average import price index. I'm giving you the definition first. Terms of trade is a ratio of average export price index to average import price index. When we are dealing with terms of trade, we want to see how export and import prices are behaving. Every country wants to sell its exports at a higher price and buy imports at a lower price. So when we are observing the export prices and import prices of our country or a specific country, we are dealing with terms of trade. This should be noted in your mind that when we are dealing with the terms of trade, we are dealing only with the prices. We have nothing to do that how prices are influencing the quantities of exports and imports, or how prices are influencing the total value of exports and total value of imports. When we are dealing with the terms of trade, we only want to see what is happening to the export prices and import prices of a country. If export prices will rise and import prices would fall, terms of trade will improve. However, if export prices fall and import prices rise, terms of trade will worsen. It is obvious that when export prices will increase, our country will receive more per unit revenue from the same level of export as compared to before. But if its import price is rising, it is obvious that for the same 1 unit of import, it is paying a greater amount of money, which is obviously a bad thing. So if export prices are rising, it is a good thing because per unit revenue for your exports is increasing. But if import prices are rising, it is obvious that you're paying more money per unit, and that is obviously a bad indicator. If export prices are falling, it means you're receiving lesser revenue from your per unit export. But if import prices are falling, it is a good thing because you are paying lesser on the same 1 unit of import. But if we talk about terms of trade, assuming that prices are not involved, assuming that money is not there, and two countries are involved in barter, then terms of trade would be defined as the rate at which countries are trading with each other. For example, if Pakistan is selling 1 dozen of bananas for 6 oranges, so that would be called terms of trade or exchange rate at which the Pakistan is trading, right? So in the language of the barter system, when the barter system existed in this world, there the terms of trade would be defined as the exchange rate at which two countries are trading with each other. But this definition obviously is irrespective these days because we hardly ever barter. We export goods and services and receive a price for them, and we import goods and services and pay a price for them. Therefore, this definition has nothing to do with the modern terms of trade definition. However, I wrote it here because it is given in the Colin Bamford, which is the endorsed book of the CAIE. That's why I've mentioned this definition here. Terms of trade, I told you, measures what is happening to export prices and import prices, because every country wants that its export prices should increase and import prices should fall, because every country wants that it should receive a greater revenue from the same level of export, and it wants to minimize its expense for the same level of imports. Terms of trade are measured in terms of index. Therefore, the equation is terms of trade index is equal to average export price index divided by average import price index multiplied by 100. So this is the equation with the help of which we measure the terms of trade index. Average export price index divided by average import price index multiplied by 100. Let me tell you what this equation is showing. First of all, what is meant by the average price? Average price simply means total of all prices divided by number of prices. Obviously, every country exports a lot of things and it imports a lot of things. Therefore, we have to calculate the average export price and average import price. Let's suppose if Pakistan would be importing only one good and would be importing only one good, then it would be very easy to see the terms of trade position. We'll see what is happening to the export price of that good which we are exporting and what is happening to the import price of that good which we are importing. So it would have been very easy if we used to export one good and used to import one good. But the point is that if we export a lot of things and we import a lot of things, that's why we will have to calculate the average price. And average price will be calculated by summing up all the export prices and dividing it by the number of prices, and then all the import prices will be summed up, and that would be divided by the number of prices. We will find the average import price. So as we import a lot of things and export a lot of things, that's why it is important to calculate average export price and average import price. Index shows changes of prices in terms of 100. If you have already gone through the concept of CPI, consumer price index, or retail price index, you would be knowing that what is the meaning of index. Whenever we want to reflect the changes in something in terms of 100, that is called index. For example, if a price is rising by 10%, we will write it as 110. 100 is the base year or base time index, and we want to see the variation in terms of 100. So if anything is rising by 10%, we will mention it as in the value of 110. But if the value of something is falling by 10%, we will write it as 90, because the value is falling 10% from 100. So when we are talking about index, it means that we want to reflect the changes in terms of 100, and that is called index. So average price index would be divided by the average import price index, and that would be multiplied by 100. So we will find the terms of trade index. If the value of terms of trade index is above 100, terms of trade are favorable. But if it is below 100, terms of trade are unfavorable. Obviously, you can see that average export price index is in the numerator and average import price index is in the denominator. So the value would be above 100 only if average export price index would be higher than average import price index. And that means terms of trade are favorable. If average export price index would be greater than average import price index, and will divide them and will multiply them by 100, obviously the value would be above 100, and this would show that terms of trade are favorable. But if the import price would be greater than export price, obviously the denominator would be greater than numerator, and when we'll multiply it by 100, obviously the value would be lesser than 100, and terms of trade, it means, are unfavorable, right? I have shown you some examples here. Terms of trade index is equal to average export price index divided by average import price index multiplied by 100. I'm repeating that average export price means that all the prices of all the export prices have been added together and have been divided by the number of prices. And when we are calculating the average import price index, it means that we have summed up all the import prices and we have divided it by the number of prices. And index, I told you, okay, whenever we are reflecting the price changes in terms of 100, that is called index. So when we will divide average export price index with average import price index and will multiply it with 100, we'll find our terms of trade index. For example, average export price index here is 120. This 120 means that on average export prices have risen by 20%. Average export price index 120 means that on average export prices have risen by 20%. That's why the index is 120. Average import price index here is 110. It is showing that on average import prices have risen by 10%, right? So 120 export price and average export price index divided by 110, which is average import price index, and when we'll multiply it by 100, we'll get 109, which is showing that terms of trade are favorable because they are above 100, right? Now see another example. Terms of trade average export price index is 110, which means as compared to the base year, average export prices have risen by 10%, while average import prices have fallen by 10%. And when we are multiplying it by 100, we are getting 122. So terms of trade are favorable because they are above 100, and as compared to 109, they have improved. Initially, let's suppose the terms of trade index was 109, and now it is 122. It means that terms of trade position has improved. But later on, as compared to base year, you can see that average export prices have fallen by 10%, while average import prices have risen by 10%. 110 means obviously 10% increase in import prices, and 90 means that 10% fall in export prices. And by dividing them and multiplying it by 100, we are having 81, which is below 100. It means terms of trade are unfavorable. And they have worsened as well, because initially the terms of trade were 122, now they are 81. So it means that terms of trade position is worsening, and initially it was favorable because it was above 100, but now it is below 100. It is worsening and is unfavorable. So this is how terms of trade index would be calculated, and this would be the meaning of the answers: 109 favorable, 122 favorable, more favorable, and 81 unfavorable. I hope you understand the point. I hope you understand the calculation. If there is any confusion, you can ask in the comments. Now, factors influencing terms of trade position of a country. And the point is very simple. Terms of trade position will change when export and import prices will change. And this is very obvious to understand, because terms of trade is actually calculating or reflecting the changes in export prices and import prices, then obviously the terms of trade position will change when export and import prices will change. And we know that export and import prices will depend on the demand and supply of exports and imports. If the demand for exports and imports will rise, if the demand for exports and imports would fall, if supply of exports and imports will rise, if supply of imports and exports would fall, obviously the terms of trade position will change. I've given you one example here. For instance, if demand for Pakistan's cotton increases in Japan, you know that we are a big exporter of cotton throughout the world, and we export our cotton to different countries. That's why I've assumed this example. So if demand for cotton increases in Japan, Pakistan will receive a higher price of cotton from Japan. Because if demand for cotton, Pakistan's cotton in Japan will increase, obviously the cotton prices will go up and Pakistan will receive a higher price of cotton from Japan. This would mean that Pakistan's export price and Japan's import price is rising. Because cotton is export of Pakistan, that's why Pakistan's export price is rising, and for Japan it is an import price. So for Japan, import price is rising. So we would see that Japan's terms of trade will worsen because import prices are rising, but Pakistan's terms of trade will improve because its export prices are rising, right? So the terms of trade position of a country is purely influenced by the demand and supply factors of exports and imports. Whenever demand and supply conditions will change, export and import prices will change. And when export and import prices will change, obviously terms of trade position will change. For example, if demand for Brazilian coffee in Pakistan decreases, the prices of Brazilian coffee in Pakistan would fall. This would mean that Brazil's export price is falling while Pakistan's import price is falling. When Pakistan's import price is falling, Pakistan's terms of trade are improving, while Brazil's export price is falling, Brazil's terms of trade will worsen, right? So I've given you one more example. I hope that is clear to you. Let me give you one more example. Let's suppose there is a recession in US and demand for Chinese exports is falling in US. As a result, Chinese export prices will go down, improving US terms of trade and worsening Chinese terms of trade. I hope this is clear to you. Now, what is the relation between terms of trade and balance of trade? How will changes in terms of trade position of a country would influence its balance of trade? Okay? How will changes in terms of trade influence balance of trade depends on the PED of exports and imports. If terms of trade will improve, it will positively influence balance of trade if price elasticity of demand for exports and imports is price inelastic, and will negatively influence if its demand is price elastic. Please note this point. If the terms of trade is improving, that obviously means that export prices are rising. If terms of trade are improving, it means export prices are rising. When export prices will rise, they will increase the revenue of the exporting country only if the demand is inelastic. If it would be elastic, then an increase in export price will result in a fall in revenues of the exporting country, and its balance of trade would be influenced negatively. Likewise, if terms of trade are improving, it means import prices are falling, and a fall in import price would favor an importing country only when its demand is inelastic, because when import prices will fall, import bill will fall if the demand is inelastic, because a fall in import prices are not influencing the quantity demanded positively much. So when import prices would fall and the demand is highly inelastic, then importing country would face a lesser import bill. That's why its balance of trade will improve. On the contrary, if terms of trade are worsening, that would positively influence only if the PD of exports and imports is price elastic. If the terms of trade are worsening, it obviously means that export prices are falling, and your falling export prices would be only favorable for you if demand for your exports outside the country is elastic. Because if export prices falling and the demand is elastic, obviously the demand would increase more than proportionately and export revenues would increase. But if your export price is falling and demand for your exports is highly inelastic, your export revenues would obviously fall. Worsening terms of trade means that import prices are rising. If import prices are rising and your demand for imports is inelastic, import bill will further increase. But if the import price is rising and demand for imports is elastic, then due to an increase in import prices, demand would fall more than proportionately and import bill will go down. So mind it that how would the terms of trade position influence the balance of trade totally depends on the price elasticity of demand for your exports and imports. So, dear students, we have seen that what is meant by the terms of trade, what is the overall background of terms of trade position, how it is calculated, when it is favorable and unfavorable, how terms of trade position is influenced, and how terms of trade position influences balance of trade. If anything is unclear, please ask in the comment box, and please subscribe the channel if you find my videos appropriate for you, effective for you, beneficial for you. Let the external benefit spread more. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much.